through my mindfulness journey, learning about the neuroscience of our nervous system and really understanding that emotions start in the body first. And so I found this incredibly fascinating that fear and excitement show up the same in the body. So you will have the same visceral sensations of fear as you do as someone that's excited to fly or to excited to do a thing or fearful of a thing. You can get sweaty palms, you can have butterflies in your stomach. And the only difference between, like, let's say flying is the story, the cognitive story that we tell ourselves about it. So maybe it comes from a bad experience. Maybe you just didn't do it a lot when you were younger and you don't fly that much. And maybe you read too much about or see the news too much about crashes or fires or hostage situations or whatever it is. And you create a narrative in your head about it. And so when you say we create our own suffering, is a lot of it comes from the cognitive side or the story side, which oftentimes can be based on different experiences we have. But when you get back into the body, you start moving into that spiritual realm because of the energy piece that we talked about. My mindfulness journey started very secular because I was bringing it into schools. I was bringing it into public schools, so it had to be secular. And after many, many years of doing that and having my own practice, there was some controversy or conversations a lot around, is it spiritual? And I got to a point, at least for me, is like, you can only take that so far at a secular level, and it has to be spiritual because you start understanding the interconnectedness of everything. And I think there's certain perspectives that, or beliefs or experiences that people have that can keep it secular. But then once you start having those experiences, once you start opening up and being receptive, it's really hard to unsee. So it's interesting to think about it. And I love that phrase of spiritual beings living in a human existence because that's the tension.
Well, it's even interesting hearing you say that, right? What does science really do? Science is here to basically disprove a lot of stuff. That's the process, the scientific process is to go through and disprove a lot of things. And if science were end all be all, then we wouldn't keep iterating, learning, and saying the things we used to think were true aren't. And yet I think sometimes we forget that as humans, and we get to this black and white thing of like, you have to prove it to me. But people used to believe the earth was flat. People didn't. Like, the idea that there were microscopic germs that could kill you was seen as crazy. And so to your point, I love the bringing it back to the body, because I think for me, that's where a lot of it started, where it was like, I can't explain this thing, but I experienced it. And then I saw this outcome come, and I don't know another way to prove it other than my experience has done it. And I think for me, to your point, part of my journey, especially these last 5 years, is I've enabled myself to stop stuffing down, ignoring, overruling, second guessing the things that the insights, the perspectives, the knowings that would come to me, is to allow myself to be receptive to it. And as I've been more receptive to it, I've seen more and more of it, where it's become really evident of like, no, that's actually, maybe I don't have the words for it. Maybe I can't explain exactly why, but I know it to be true because of what I've experienced. And I've been able to have some just amazing conversations with other people who have experienced the same thing that might have a different language to it or a different way of speaking, but right, an understanding of whatever we know cognitively to be true is not the entire story. And that when you allow yourself to be receptive to a broader view of things, amazing things sort of show up. So this last week, I was talking a lot about synchronicity. And I'm actually going to pull this up because I pulled the definition because I loved it so much. I was like, this is what I feel like keeps showing up in my life. And I think this is a lot of what happens when we actually do begin to open and expand our perspective, when we do actually stop and say, how did I know that? Or what am I feeling right now? And we start tuning into things beyond just logic. I think to your point, and I loved how you said that, a lot of what happens, a lot of the suffering is created in our own mind and our own consciousness, and we are shutting out everything else. It's almost as if you got in your car and you started driving and you drove cross country for 15 years and you never went to the car wash and you had no washer fluid. And so the entire view out your window is completely blocked and shady and dirty, and you can't see anything, but you believe that you have the entire view. And it's only through actually cleaning that lens that you can see the entirety of what everything was from the get-go. It was just hidden underneath everything else. And I sort of feel like that's what my experience has been, where I spent so many years stressed out in my corporate job, so many years trying to please everybody, do everything, be successful, make sure I didn't make any mistakes, that like my lens was so dirty I couldn't see anything. But I felt it. I felt unsettled. I felt unfulfilled. I felt in the nights, at night when I was done and it was quiet, I knew it. I knew something was off. I knew I was unfulfilled. I knew there was something sitting there and I just didn't know how to solve it. And so I think a lot of it is like this really shady, dirty windshield that we're looking through that needs to get cleaned, right? Some of that is like opening yourself up to a different perspective and being able to see what are the things cognitively that are standing in your way, but also being open to the fact that maybe you don't need to have words to explain everything. Maybe in fact, we just haven't figured it out yet. Maybe 50 years from now, we can explain energy and why all these things happen and really understand it. But I would also say if you study science, you'll see a lot of the concepts are already there. It's just we're not applying them mentally to these things. But back to synchronicity. So synchronicity is a concept first introduced by psychologist Carl Jung, who was one of my favorites in studying psychology in school. He describes circumstances that appear meaningfully related yet lack a causal connection. And it says synchronicities are not just coincidences meant to surprise and delight us, although they can definitely do that. Rather, spiritual synchronicities are strategically orchestrated and perfectly aligned to deliver a message, provide guidance, or provide reassurance that we're on the right path. And I know for you and I, we've been having a lot of these as of late, a lot of things showing up. And I remember one of the things one of our mutual mentors shared about that the gold is hidden in plain sight, but often we don't see it because the windshield is dirty. And so I hope through our community and through some of these conversations, we can start to help people clean the windshield so that they can actually get to the greater connection and purpose in their life. Because I guess it goes back to Oprah Winfrey. What I know to be true is that we each have a purpose and a calling in this life. And if we ignore that, we stuff it down, we create immense suffering for ourselves and others. And that through actually connecting to who we really are and the experiences we're really having, right? What is that energy telling us? What is that sense of intuition? What is that inner voice actually telling us? That we become free. And through that, we get the fun synchronicities and the intuition, and it becomes easy. Things flow, things show up. We see the gold right in front of us. And no longer is it this struggle to create what we want and this frustration that we can't control things and this needing to feel like we have to do everything to create this life that we want.
Yeah, there's just a lot more ease. Like that's a big thing that I like to focus on, is doing things with more ease. And we've talked about this too, of like some people are more receptive to kind of just feeling what other people are feeling. Or for me, it just becomes like when I meet people, are they light or are they heavy? Like is there, and that's energy, right? And so even with my husband, a lot of trauma in his background and things like that. And he's been on his own path. And one of the wishes I had for him like 5 years ago is like, I just want you to live with more ease. Because it's like, he's a high fact finder too. And he's analyzing everything and trying to put meaning to everything. And the image I get and the sensing is like when you meet people that are just wound tight, right? And so it's just like expansion and like just loosening up the threads a little bit and just live with more ease. And it's been amazing to watch his journey because he's so light now. And the human side's always, the defaults are always going to come in, but the work he's been doing around his awareness around that has been phenomenal. Like just really, particularly in the past like year and a half or so, and more concentrated in like the past 4 months, just because he started working with one of my mentors and teachers. And so that has been hugely helpful. But in terms of like, I don't know, I get this image, you were talking about the dirty windshield. And so getting that clarity, but then another image that popped into my head talked about the box system. There's a box system and we put ourselves in a box, and some boxes are bigger than others. And the box is just the boundaries that we need to stay safe or to know so that we're comfortable with what we know. And I always think of kind of like the pie chart with the open end. So like you've got what you know, which are just like two pieces of the pie. And then the rest of the pie, which actually doesn't have a boundary, is just wide open unknown, is the things you know that you don't know that you don't know. And so one of the practices I've been kind of just playing around with myself is catching myself, because I have such a strong conditioning of needing to know, not so much like the fact finding side of having to dig, way because I actually don't need a lot of details or information, but there's a lot of shame that I've had to work through about being embarrassed if I don't know something in a conversation of people, of like if they're talking about something, and for me to say, oh, I've never heard of that book, or oh, I didn't know that fact, or whatever, for whatever reason, it was incredibly embarrassing to the point of shame for me. And so I had to work through that to be able to just be like, oh, I didn't know that, or just get curiosity is really the thing that has really helped me. It's just being curious about everything and then focusing on like, this is what I do know, this is where I bring value, and like, oh, let's find out about this other thing. So it's just been interesting. The box system is there, and I'll have to find it and share it with you, but we have this idea of like the galaxy and the universe. And there was, I don't know if it was a meme or a cartoon or something, but it was like, what if that's just a huge box? And like beyond that, it was just like the immense possibility that's out there and how we confine ourselves based on our experiences, our thoughts, whatever our beliefs are. And one might be like a little ring box, and the other one might be like something that a car can fit inside, or greater, or the earth, or whatever it is. But it's this ability to have space and flow within the unknown.
I love that visual so much. And I think to your point, why does this matter? What is this community really about? And I think there's so much about what you said about putting ourselves in boxes. I think that's 100% how I lived 40 some odd years of my life, and how I think almost most people are living their lives with a very tight perspective about what's possible for them, or what the truth is, trying to control all of the outcomes, and it's exhausting. And this is why we have an entire society of people who are mindlessly, numblessly, right, going through Facebook, why we have people that are severely overweight, alcoholics, doing drugs. These are all things that people are doing to cope with actually avoiding the negative things they're feeling and trying to control their life. And why do we do that? Like, if we really stop and think about it, I think the biggest question I would love to challenge people is, why do you feel like you need to control everything? One of our, again, mutual mentors said the other day that people who are control freaks really don't control anything. They're actually not good at controlling things, but what it is a sign that they don't trust. They lack trust. And I think that really hit home for me, of like actually stopping and saying, what don't you trust? Is it that you don't trust yourself? Is it that you don't trust others? Is it that you don't actually believe that the world is good and that good things will come to you? And I think many of us have not stopped to even think about or question that. And there's certainly, we won't have enough time to dive into this today, but there's a lot of reasons why we form those beliefs as children. There's a lot of survival instincts, etc., that we can get into that cause us to get into those patterns. But at the heart of it, right, the idea of spiritual beings living a human existence is an understanding that we are just a speck in the universe, and that we never really had control over things anyway. And if in fact things were really built for our benefit, that we're really here for a purpose, that things will work out as they should if we stop feeling the need to try and control, ignore, manage everything, and just allow more space for it to be what it is. And I think, to your point, the amount of personal freedom, expansiveness, peace of mind, joy, passion in my life that has come in the last 5 years through doing this work and through cleaning the windshield is so inexplicably amazing that I really feel it's like my calling to share it, because I'm watching so many people around me suffering with no understanding that the keys to freedom exist. You're just maybe looking for them in the wrong place.
And I think sometimes when we come across people that do this work, I know in the beginning I did as a type A perfectionist when I started the work around kind of peeling away the layers, is when you come through that transformation, and you see what's possible, you can't help but want everyone around you to experience it, especially the people that you deeply respect and care for and love. And so then sometimes that can be off-putting, because for me, my entry point was mindfulness. So then everybody had like that became, as one of our mentors says, like everything looks like a nail. And so I had to go. So I think that can be for some people part of that process. But as you were talking, I was thinking about just some of the things that we said in this conversation, and remembering, because because humans can tend to be so black and white, when you say, you just let go of things, then it becomes this like, oh, if I'm all bottled up and I'm controlling everything, okay, now I'm just not going to do anything. And so just like keeping that in mind, like this is such a small speck connected to other things that make it all work, that if anyone listens to this and says, oh, I'm going to go do this, that we don't know all the other things that are connected that worked for me, which is different than what worked for you, and whoever's listening will be different. So just allowing the grace of like keeping the loop open. Right? Like just being curious, like, oh, how does that impact me? What's relevant about any of this conversation? What little nugget can I take away? And depending on where you are in your life, then that's what's happening right now. Like there's no formula for this. Everybody's path is different, and there are many doorways. So sometimes you're just standing at the window looking in before you actually step through and try and find a door to really dive in. So I'm excited to have many conversations and where the conversations will take us and what the community can bring to this.